3 hours after the board voted him out, Dojin didn't reach for a gun, didn't call a lawyer, reached instead for a single page of numbers that wasn't his, and would decide if he kept anything at all. The page sat on the boardroom table where they'd left it, 12 signatures deep, each one a man who'd sworn loyalty to Dojin at some point in the last decade. The ledger said he'd been skimming from the syndicate's shipping fronts for 18 months. Amara picked it up after everyone else had gone, turned it over once in her hands like she could feel a lie the way she felt a bad shipment manifest. By weight, by the way the numbers refused to sit still. 6 weeks earlier, none of this existed. Dojin ran the northern trade routes the way he ran everything. Quietly, precisely. A man who trusted exactly 4 people with anything that mattered. Amara was one of them, brought in to legitimize the fronts, to turn blood money into boring, defensible spreadsheets. Grace was another, his oldest ally in the organization, the one who'd covered for him when he was 26, and reckless, and nearly got them both killed over a shipment that went wrong in Busan. He never asked Grace to prove her loyalty after that. He assumed the debt only ran one direction. Now the board wanted him gone by Friday. Not dead. Worse, in this world. Disgraced, replaced, made small enough that no one below him would ever fear him again. Amara looked at the ledger a second time and noticed what everyone else in that room had missed in their hurry to condemn him. The numbers were too clean. Real theft leaves fingerprints. This left a signature. If you think the people closest to us are the ones who could hurt us the deepest, comment, "I see it," and stay to the end. Dojin took the news the way he took everything, standing very still, hands flat on the table, giving nothing away to the 11 men watching for a crack. Only Amara, 3 feet to his left, saw his jaw tighten once, when the chairman said the word, unanimous. Grace had voted with the rest. She hadn't looked at him when she raised her hand. If you think loyalty gets tested hardest the moment a man has nothing left to offer, hit like and subscribe right now, because the empire is about to turn on him from the inside. Stay for every twist. Only the ones already planning his funeral would scroll past this without subscribing. Don't be one of them. That night, Dojin didn't come home to the penthouse until past midnight, and when he did, he found Amara at the kitchen island with 3 laptops open and a look on her face that he'd learned, over the past year, meant she'd already started a war he didn't know about yet. "You're not going to accept this," he said. It wasn't a question. She didn't look up. "I run your legitimate businesses, Dojin. I know exactly how clean money moves, and this ledger moves dirty. Someone built this to look real, to men who don't check the arithmetic." He sat across from her, tired in a way she'd rarely seen, the tired of a man who'd spent 15 years being feared, and now had to sit with the specific humiliation of being doubted instead. "Who had access to build something like this?" he asked. Amara turned one of the laptops to face him. 4 people, she said. "You, me, Grace, and the accountant who's been dead for 2 years. So really, 3. He didn't say Grace's name. He didn't have to. The silence between them did the accusing for both of them, and neither one wanted to be the first to make it real, because naming her meant admitting that 15 years of loyalty could curdle into something else without either of them noticing exactly when. The gala came 4 days later, the syndicate's annual charity dinner, the one event where rivals and allies wore the same tailored suits and pretended the whole city wasn't built on debts collected in blood. Dojin still came. Walking in on his own 2 feet into a room that had already decided he was finished took a particular kind of nerve, and Amara walked in 1 step behind him, close enough that anyone watching would understand exactly where her loyalty had landed. It was Grace who found them first, champagne in hand, smile arranged into something warm and practiced. "Brave of you to show up," she said to Dojin, voice pitched for the small circle of men nearby to hear. Some men know when to bow out gracefully. Dojin held her eyes a beat too long. "I'm still standing, Grace," he said. "Careful who you write off before Friday." Amara watched Grace's smile hold perfectly steady, which told her more than anything Grace could have said out loud. A woman with nothing to hide gets defensive. A woman hiding something gets composed. Grace had spent the last 4 days getting very, very composed. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Amara pulled the financial records she'd been quietly building for 3 days, cross-referencing shipment dates against Grace's known travel, against a shell logistics company registered 11 months ago under a name that meant nothing, until Amara traced the registered agent back to Grace's cousin, the same cousin who'd once done Grace a favor with a fake passport during the Busan trouble. Money doesn't disappear, Amara thought, staring at the screen at 1 in the morning. It just gets embarrassed and hides behind names that almost don't connect. She'd built an empire out of exactly this kind of patience, the kind that outlasts people who think being clever once is the same as being clever forever. By morning she had it. A trail of payments from a rival faction, the Osan Group, routed through Grace's shell company and into 3 accounts that eventually funded the fabricated ledger entries, each one timed to land exactly when it would do the most damage to Dojin's standing on the board. She didn't wake him with it. She'd learned that much from watching him operate for a year, that a man who leads with instinct needs proof solid enough to survive his first instinct, which was always to confront the wound directly and let the bleeding sort itself out later. So she waited. She got dressed for a lunch she hadn't been invited to and invited herself instead. Grace arrived at the restaurant already smiling, already warm, the same warmth she'd worn for 15 years, like a second skin nobody thought to check underneath. "You look tired," Grace said, settling into her seat. "Caregiving does that," Amara said lightly. "You'd know, if you visited Dojin's office more than once a month lately." Something flickered behind Grace's eyes, fast, controlled. But Amara had spent a year learning to read rooms the way Grace apparently thought only she could. "I found the shell company," Amara said, no longer lightly. "Registered to your cousin. Funded by Osan money. Feeding a ledger that happened to surface 4 days before the board vote that would have finished him. That's not a coincidence, Grace. That's architecture. And you built it." The silence lasted exactly as long as it takes a person to decide whether denial is still worth the effort. Grace's face didn't break into confession. She was too controlled for that. It broke into something closer to grief, the grief of a plan finally forced into daylight before it was ready. "You don't understand what he was becoming," Grace said finally, voice low, careless, loud, making enemies faster than he could bury them, and dragging both of us down with him. Osan wasn't going to wait for him to slow down on his own. They were going to remove him the old way. I gave them a different way. Disgrace, instead of a body bag. I thought that was mercy. "You destroyed him to save him," Amara said, and Grace flinched, because hearing it out loud from someone else made it sound exactly as broken as it was. "I protected what's left of him," Grace said. "A man in disgrace can still walk into a room. A man in a grave can't do anything at all." Amara set her coffee down without drinking it. "You didn't protect him. You decided for him. There's a difference. And it's the same difference between loyalty and control. You just dressed control up in 15 years of history so no one, including you, would notice the switch." That afternoon, Amara laid everything in front of Dojin at once. The shell company, the Osan payments, the timing, Grace's own cousin's signature on the paperwork. He listened without moving, the particular stillness of a man doing arithmetic on a betrayal too large to process out loud. When she finished, he said only one thing. "She should have just told me the truth. I would have listened." "Maybe," Amara said. "Or maybe she knew you well enough to know you'd have walked into Osan's guns head first rather than let them corner you quietly." Either way, that was her choice to make about her own fear. Not yours to survive without knowing it was happening. The board reconvened that Friday expecting a formality. The quiet removal of a man they'd already decided was finished. Instead, Dojin walked in with Amara beside him and laid the entire trail on the table himself. The shell company, the Osan financing, the manufactured ledger, Grace's own signature buried 3 layers deep in paperwork she thought no one would ever check. The room that had voted unanimously against him 4 days earlier went very quiet, the particular quiet of powerful men realizing they'd nearly let themselves be maneuvered by someone outside their own walls. What he didn't need to. By the time Amara finished walking them through the financial architecture with the same precision she used on every legitimate contract she'd ever built, the vote to reverse itself was unanimous too. Grace wasn't in the room for the reversal. She'd already gone, no goodbye, no confrontation, just an empty desk, and the kind of silence that meant she understood exactly what she'd lost, the moment the truth outran her plan. Dojin didn't send anyone after her. Some bridges don't get burned. They just quietly stop being bridges. That night, back at the penthouse, the city lights doing what they always did outside the window, indifferent to whatever had almost ended inside it, Dojin found Amara exactly where she always ended up, 3 steps ahead of a problem he hadn't finished naming yet. "I keep underestimating how far people will go for me," he said. "Good," Amara said. "Means you'll keep needing me to catch what you miss." He almost smiled. The old rules said the most dangerous man in Seoul needed no one. The new rules, the ones he was still learning, said the most dangerous man in Seoul was the one smart enough to know exactly who was standing beside him when the numbers stopped adding up. And for the first time in 15 years, Dojin trusted that the answer wasn't a guess anymore. It was Amara. It had been Amara the whole time. Episode 5 drops next week. Comment who you think comes for the throne next. Osan, or someone closer than they think.